when Monty Python's Life of Brian came out 30 years ago, it caused a tremendous stir. Now, there are definitely reasons to object to the film, but it's never convinced me that we should object to it simply because the film makes fun of religious people. Jesus made fun of religious people constantly. No, the problem with The Life of Brian is not that it is a comedy. Its biggest problem is that it is not a comedy. Okay, it's very funny in places, but in the end, it is finally a complete tragedy. Its hero, Brian, is crucified and there is no rescue, no resurrection. Just a catchy song whistled from the cross. Always look on the bright side of death, just before you draw your terminal breath. You know, life is quite absurd and death's the final word. You'll see it's all a show, keep 'em laughing as you go. Just remember that the last laugh is on you. Is that a comedy? No, actually, classically speaking, that is the definition of a tragedy. It's a story that begins in joy and ends in pain. The problem with The Life of Brian is not that it's a comedy. The problem is that it's not a comedy. It's a tragedy. It tells you that death has the last word. There's the old saying, isn't there? Whoever laughs last, laughs loudest. Well, here is the gospel according to Monty Python. According to Monty Python, death has the last laugh. And if that's true, then all comedy is only ever black comedy. All humour is gallows humour. It's about whistling through the graveyard to keep your spirits up. But according to Monty Python, life itself is not a comedy. According to Monty Python, life is a tragedy, an utter tragedy. And we can maybe grab a few moments of joy while it lasts, but life is tragic. Yet in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, Paul is going to tell us life is actually a comedy. Brian may have perished, but Christ was raised from the dead, and in the twinkling of an eye he will raise us on the pattern of his own resurrection, which he will apply to the entire cosmos, which means that death does not have the last laugh. No, the Christian, even as they await their own certain death, we can laugh at the grave. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 55, we can taunt the grave and say, "Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting?" This is incredible cheek, really. Death has conquered every human being who has ever lived. The grave swallows us all. We don't have a hope in the world, and yet here is the most audacious taunt. It's like David against Goliath, gloating about a victory that seems impossible. How can Paul speak like this to the grave? Well, he continues in verse 56, the sting of death is sin, and the power of sin is the law, but thanks be to God, he gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. The victory does not belong to us, it belongs to Jesus. He has submitted himself to death, pushed on through the grave and out the other side into immortal life. He has drawn the sting of death and risen again as the first fruits of a bumper crop of resurrection, as we were thinking about yesterday. When we are united to Jesus, we share in both his death and his risen life. Yes, we will enter death, but the sting is drawn by Christ. For us, it will not be the curse of God-forsakenness. For us, it will be falling asleep in Jesus. And death will not have the last word. It does not have the victory. Christ does. We must ask ourselves, what story do we inhabit? Is this a tragedy where death laughs at us? Or do we live in a cosmic comedy where we laugh at death? Incredibly, it's the latter. We don't cower before death. We don't make a few nervous jokes in the face of the inevitable. We can look death square in the eye and laugh at it. Life is a glorious and eternal comedy. And all's well that ends well. So thanks be to God, who gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ.